In this video, we are going to learn about external features of heart and we are going to decode heart anatomy from Bedi Chaurasia. Before getting into external features of the heart, we'll just see the structure of the heart, okay? The human heart has four chambers. These are the right and left atria and the right and left ventricles. The atria, the Latin word atria means the chamber. Okay, the atria lie above and behind the ventricles and not only above the ventricles but behind the ventricles. Okay, on the surface of the heart, they are separated from the ventricles by atrioventricular groove. The atria are separated from each other by an interatrial groove. The ventricles are separated from each other by interventricular groove, which is subdivided into anterior and posterior parts. The external features of the heart consists of the apex, a base, the surfaces, borders, and margins. Okay, first we are going to look at the apex of the heart. The apex of the heart is formed entirely by the left ventricle. It is directed downwards and forwards and to the left and is overlapped by the anterior border of the lung. It is situated in the left fifth intercostal space, 9 centimeters lateral to the mid-sternal line and just medial to the mid-clavicular line. In the living subject, pulsations may be seen and felt over this region. In adults, these pulsations are heard in the fifth intercostal space, whereas in children below 2 years, apex is situated in the left fourth intercostal space in mid-clavicular line. Normally, the cardiac apex or apex beat is on the left side, right? In a condition called dextrocardia, the apex is on the right side. Dextrocardia may be a part of condition called situs inversus. Situs inversus is a rare genetic condition in which the organs in your chest and abdomen are reversed. There are four main surfaces of heart, namely the anterior surface, the diaphragmatic surface, the base, and the pulmonary surfaces on the right and left. The base of heart. The base of the heart is also called its posterior surface. The posterior surface is mainly formed by the left atrium and a small part of the right atrium. In relation to the base, one can see the openings of four pulmonary veins which open into the left atrium and of the superior and inferior vena cava. In Latin, cave means empty vein, which open into the right atrium. The anterior or sternocostal surface is formed mainly by the right atrium and right ventricle and partly by the left ventricle and left auricle. The left atrium is not seen on the anterior surface and it is covered by the aorta and pulmonary trunk. Most of the sternocostal surface is covered by the lungs, but a part of it that lies behind the cardiac notch of the left lung is uncovered. The uncovered area is dull on percussion. Clinically, it is referred to as the area of superficial cardiac dullness. The inferior or diaphragmatic surface rests on the central tendon of the diaphragm. It is formed by It is formed in its left two-thirds by the left ventricle and the right one-third by the right ventricle. It is traversed by the posterior interventricular groove and is directed downwards and slightly backwards. Now we have completed the base, anterior surface and the diaphragmatic surface. The remaining two pulmonary surfaces are formed by, on the right side, The right pulmonary surface is formed by the right atria, and on the left side, the left pulmonary surface is formed by the left ventricle. Now let's make the surfaces simpler. I will summarize for you. First, the base is formed by the right atrium, left atrium, and the proximal part of the great veins. And the diaphragmatic surface is formed by the right ventricle, left ventricle. The anterior surface. The anterior surface is formed by the right ventricle majorly, left ventricle, and the right atria. And the pulmonary surfaces. On the right, it is formed by the right atrium, and on the left, it is formed by the left ventricle. Now there are these margins called obtuse margin and the inferior margins. Obtuse margin which extends from the left auricle to the apex, separating the anterior and pulmonary left pulmonary surface, and the inferior margin which is the edge between the anterior and the diaphragmatic surfaces. These two meet to form the apex. Now the borders, namely the superior or upper, the right, inferior, and the left borders. The superior or upper border is formed by the left atria and right atria. It is mostly formed by the left atria and partly by right atria. Okay. Then the right border. The right border is completely formed by the right atria. It starts from the opening of the superior vena cava and goes all the way to the opening of the inferior vena cava. And the inferior border is formed by the right ventricle and the left ventricle, mostly by the right ventricle and partly, in particularly, the apex by the left ventricle. And finally, the left border. The left border is formed by the left ventricle. Now again I'll be summarizing this for you. The borders, the superior or upper border is formed by the left atria and the right atria, and the right border is formed by the right atria, and the inferior border is formed by the right ventricle and left ventricle, and the left border is formed by the left ventricle. All you need to learn is the diagram of heart so that you could explain whatever you have learned. Learning anatomy is impossible without learning diagrams. Now finally, the grooves or sulci. The two primary grooves or sulci are the atrioventricular or coronary sulcus and the interventricular groove. The atria are separated from the ventricles by a circular arterioventricular or coronary sulcus. It is divided into anterior and posterior parts. Anterior part consists of the right and left halves. Right half is oblique between the right auricle and right ventricle, lodging right coronary artery. Left part is small between the left auricle and the left ventricle, which lodges circumflex branch of the left coronary. The coronary sulcus is overlapped anteriorly by the ascending aorta and the pulmonary trunk. The interarterial groove is faintly visible posteriorly, while anteriorly it is hidden by the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. Now the interventricular groove. The anterior interventricular groove is near to the left margin of the heart. It runs downwards and to the left. The lower end of the groove separates the apex from the rest of the inferior border of the heart, whereas the posterior interventricular groove is situated on the diaphragmatic or inferior surface of the heart. It is nearer to the right margin of the surface. Now the crux of the heart. The crux of the heart is the point where the posterior interventricular sulcus meets the coronary sulcus. This is an overview of external features of heart. Let's see what BD Chaurasia is saying. Okay, the heart. The heart is a conical hollow muscular organ situated in the middle mediastinum. It is enclosed within the pericardium. It pumps blood to various parts of the body to meet their nutritive requirements. In exam point of view, you need to write about pericardium as well, okay? Then the Greek name for the heart is cardia and the Latin name for the heart is cor. And we often use the words cardiac and cor. Cor is nothing but coronary, cardiac, cardiac arrest. And these are the Greek words, okay? That is cardia and cor for the heart. The heart is placed obliquely behind the body of the sternum and adjoining parts of the costal cartilages. Okay, as we can see it here, the heart is placed obliquely, not straight but obliquely behind the body of the sternum and adjoining parts of the costal cartilages, so that the one third of it lies to the right and two thirds of it to the left of the median plane. Okay, the heart measures about 12 into 9 centimeters and weighs about 300 grams in males and 250 grams in females. External features of heart. The human heart has four chambers. Okay, as we can see here, the four chambers. These are the right and left atria and the right and left ventricles. Okay, the the atria. The Latin word atria means chamber. Okay, lie above and behind the ventricles. They lie above and behind the ventricles and not just above the ventricles. Okay, on the surface of the heart, they are separated from the ventricles by arterioventricular groove. Okay, on the surface of the heart. Okay, the atria are separated from each other by the interatrial groove, and the ventricles are separated from each other by an interventricular groove, which is subdivided into anterior and posterior parts. Okay, the heart has an apex directed downwards and forwards, to the left a base directed backwards. Okay, anterior or sternocostal surface, inferior surface, and lateral surfaces. Okay, then apex of the heart, and this is scoring. Okay, apex of the heart apex of the heart is formed entirely by the left ventricle. Okay, it is directed downwards and forwards and to the left and is overlapped by the anterior border of the lung. It is situated in the left fifth intercostal space, as we have discussed this previously. It is situated in the fifth intercostal space, 9 centimeters lateral to the mid-sternal line, just medial to the mid-clavicular line. In the living subject, pulsations may be seen and felt over this region. Okay. In children below 2 years, apex is situated in the left fourth intercostal space, as we have discussed. Okay. And in clinical anatomy, don't forget to mention the condition dextrocardia. Okay, it is important in exam point of view. Normally, the cardiac apex or apex beat is on the left side. In the condition called dextrocardia, the apex is on the right side. Dextrocardia may be part of a condition called situs inversus, in which all the thoracic and the abdominal viscera are a mirror image of normal. And as we have learned, the organ might be reversed in this condition called situs inversus. Okay, surfaces of heart. The anterior or sternocostal surface is formed mainly by the right atrium and the right ventricle, and partly by the left ventricle and left auricle. Okay, the left atrium is not seen on the anterior surface. The left atrium is not seen on the anterior surface, as it is covered by the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. Most of the sternocostal surface is covered by the lungs, but a part of it that lies behind the cardiac notch of the left lung is uncovered. The uncovered area the uncovered area is dull on percussion. Clinically, it is referred to as the area of superficial cardiac dullness. The inferior or diaphragmatic surface rests on the central tendon of the diaphragm. It is formed in its left two thirds by the left ventricle and the right one-third by the right ventricle. Okay, it is traversed by the posterior interventricular groove and is directed downwards and slightly backwards. The left surface is formed by the left ventricle, and here they are talking about the pulmonary surfaces, okay, and the upper end by the left auricle. In its upper part, the surface is crossed by the coronary sulcus. Next, the base of the heart. The base of the heart is also called its posterior surface. Let's see this in the diagram. It is formed mainly by the left atrium and small part of the right atrium. In relation to the base, one can see the openings of four pulmonary veins which open into the left atrium, okay, and of the superior and inferior vena cava which open into the right atrium, okay. It is related to thoracic, okay, fifth thoracic to eighth thoracic vertebra in the lying posture and descends by one vertebra in the erect posture. It is separated from the vertebral column by the pericardium. It is important to know this, and not in exam point of view, but it is important to know that it is separated from the vertebral column by the pericardium, the right pulmonary veins, and the esophagus and the aorta. Okay. Then the grooves or sulci. Grooves or sulci, the arteria are separated from the ventricles by a circular atrioventricular or coronary sulcus. Let's see coronary sulcus here. The coronary sulcus is divided into anterior and posterior parts, as we can see here. The anterior part consists of the right and left halves, okay, and the right half is oblique between the right auricle and the left ventricle and lodging right coronary artery there. The left part is small between the left auricle and the left ventricle, lodging the circumflex branch of the left coronary artery. The coronary sulcus is overlapped anteriorly by the ascending aorta. Here we can see it is overlapped by the ascending aorta and the pulmonary trunk. The interatrial groove is faintly visible posteriorly, while anteriorly it is hidden by the aorta and pulmonary trunk. The anterior interventricular groove is nearer to the left margin of the heart. It runs downwards and to the left. The lower end of the groove separates the apex from the rest of the inferior border of the heart. The posterior interventricular groove is situated on the diaphragmatic or inferior surface of the heart, as we can see here. It is nearer to the right margin of the surface. The two interventricular grooves meet at the inferior border near the apex. The crux of the heart is the point where the posterior interventricular sulcus meets the coronary sulcus, as we can see here. The posterior interventricular sulcus and the coronary sulcus meet at a point, and this is called the crux of heart. Okay, in exam point of view, you have to mention this point, crux of heart. Okay, then the borders of heart. The upper border is slightly oblique and it is formed by the two atria, chiefly the left atrium. Okay, the right border is more or less vertical and is formed by the right atrium. It extends from the superior vena cava to the inferior vena cava, as we have already discussed this. The inferior border is nearly horizontal and is formed mainly by the right ventricle. A small part of it near the apex is formed by the left ventricle. It extends from the inferior vena cava to the apex. Okay. Then the left border is oblique and curved. It is formed mainly by the left ventricle and partly by the left auricle. It separates the anterior and left surfaces of the heart. It extends from the apex to the left auricle.